Hi, Dr. Robert Selig. In today's video, I want to revisit the copper-estrogen cancer connection. And I want to start to tie together this estrogen-dominant, copper-dominant syndrome that is plaguing our population today. And so this copper-estrogen dominant syndrome is causing a mineral imbalance. Now, first we need to know that minerals truly are the spark plugs of life. Minerals are responsible for energy production. Minerals make our hormones. Minerals are the reason why we have nerve transmission. Minerals are responsible for many of the neuroendocrine, neuroimmune stimulating functions of the body, including making our structure. So minerals really are the spark plugs of life. Now, when we become copper and estrogen dominant, this will affect the mineral matrix, because copper is one of those minerals that's like a Dr. Jekyll and a Mr. Hyde. When copper behaves badly, it becomes one of the most electronegative mineral on the periodic table and will become very antagonistic to magnesium, zinc, iron, molybdenum, manganese, and it will oxidize vitamin C, vitamin E, B1, and folate. It also is the most emotional mineral. And being an emotional mineral, we can see its implications when it's affecting the biochemistry in the brain, our serotonin, dopamine, adrenaline, and that can lead to many symptoms that we'll get into. But when we become estrogen dominant, it throws off the mineral balance. Now, we're becoming estrogen dominant due to the inexorable amounts of chemicals that we've been inundated from the titans of industry that have unleashed these chemicals that are behaving like hormone disruptors. We call them endocrine disruptors. We call them xenoestrogens. They're fake estrogens. They behave like hormones, wreaking havoc on the whole hormonal balance in our body, resulting and manifesting as every symptom under the sun. And so again, usually the liver can deal with these estrogens. We have our normal age-related estrogens. We have the phytoestrogens coming from the foods like soy and flax are considered phytoestrogens. But when we look at the total estrogen, we add up the phytoestrogens, the normal age-related estrogens, then we add in the xenoestrogens, and now we have total estrogens creating havoc. So the liver can usually get rid of most, typical estrogens. It's not a problem. That's a process called glucuronidation. And the liver produces this enzyme, glucuronidase transferase, that conjugates the estrogens. Basically, simply put, we start to add some vitamins, some minerals, some nutrients, some proteins to make these estrogen metabolites more water soluble, so it can go out through the liver, gallbladder, biliary system to be dumped out into the stool. That's usually how we get rid of these estrogens. But these xenoestrogens, the glyphosates coming from Roundup Ready and all these chemicals are creating gut dysbiosis. It's really throwing off the whole flora in our gut, and as a result of gut dysbiosis, we produce this bad enzyme marker called beta-glucuronidase, which is actually made in your liver and made in your gut as a result of dysbiosis, of poor gut function. And as a result of this enzyme, this inhibits this process. As a result of the estrogens being able to conjugate and go out through the bile, then these estrogens get recycled. They get recycled back into the liver. They get recycled back into the fat. They get recycled into the breast, into the ovaries, into the brain, into the bones, and that's where it becomes very problematic. And so if we can't dump these estrogens out, out, then we create a disbalance where estrogen and progesterone should be in balance. And the minerals that keep this in balance is copper, magnesium, and zinc balance out estrogen and progesterone. However, when we become estrogen dominant due to this copper toxicity, then the pendulum switches and we become copper toxic and estrogen toxic, and as a result we have low progesterone. As a result of low progesterone, that keeps the insulin high. Remember, high insulin is notorious as the fat storage hormone. Anyone that's on these insulin medications will see that their metabolism becomes a very slow, snail-like, sluggish metabolism, and you'll see a lot of fat accumulation on a lot of the patients that are taking insulin-type medications. So we know that insulin slows down metabolism. So that low progesterone causes the insulin to go high, and the low progesterone causes the longevity hormone DHEA. Now, DHEA, 50% of it is made in your brain, 50% of it is made in your adrenals. DHEA is a very important longevity hormone, and when we have low progesterone, we're going to have low DHEA, and that's going to increase fatigue, because this will eventually be converted to your androgens, to your testosterone. And so when DHEA goes low, we get a lot of fatigue, and basically we have a country that's waking up tired and going to bed tired due to this low DHEA. But the thing with DHEA, it decreases copper retention when it's low, because you need this hormone to send a signal to the liver to make two proteins. They're called protein carriers, metallothionein and ceruloplasmin. These proteins bind to the copper and makes copper a superhero. So when copper is bound properly, then it can go to the brain to make your neurochemistry, your serotonin, dopamine. It can strengthen the elastin, collagen tissues, so you're not prone to the hemorrhoids, the stretch marks, the varicosities, or the more insidious aortic aneurysms, because you need that copper for the strength of elastin, collagen tissues, including the ligaments in the body. So a lot of sprain strains, a lot of repeated chronic sprain strains, you gotta look at the copper. And so when that DHEA sends that signal to the liver, you need strong adrenals for that. Now, how do I know if a patient of mine has weak adrenals? We see on a hair tissue biopsy, if we see low sodium, low potassium, we know the adrenals aren't working optimally, and the lower those ratios go, the lower those minerals go, the more the adrenals are taking the hit. They're not doing their job. That's the battery. So we got to make this connection with this copper toxicity to the adrenals and to the liver and to this estrogen problem that we have in this country today. So that low progesterone will decrease copper excretion. As a result of decreasing copper excretion, then we have an increase in toxic copper, biounavailable copper, that wreaks havoc on the nervous system. Like I said, it's one of the most electronegative minerals on the periodic table, and it will be very antagonistic to these minerals. Now, magnesium, zinc, and iron, those three minerals alone are responsible for at least 80% of your enzymatic functions in your body. Now, let that sink in for a minute, because this is vital for human health, and when we have copper going rogue, it's going to inhibit these nutrient minerals. Now, molybdenum is one of those minerals that most people have never even heard of, and yet this mineral is the main controller of copper. And so, molybdenum, low levels of molybdenum, there have been numerous clinical studies coming out. Low molybdenum is associated with cancers of the esophagus, breast, stomach, and colon. So low molybdenum, you're going to be prone more to those types of cancers, and we can look at it from the other angle, that high toxic copper, low molybdenum, because copper blocks molybdenum. Copper blocks magnesium, zinc, iron, and the antioxidant nutrients, vitamin C, E, B1, and folate. And so we know that patients that will go to the clinic, they'll have cancer, they'll do an IV drip of vitamin C. If they haven't dealt with that copper, that vitamin C, as soon as it hits the blood, will oxidize, and basically it'll become a useless therapy. So we have to be able to deal with this copper, and we got to understand the importance of this DHEA and how it relates to the adrenals and how it relates to the liver. Now, as a result of this mineral imbalance, we create the hormone imbalance. Remember, from going from cholesterol to progesterone, that's basically 2 steps. Here we see going from cholesterol to pregnenolone, copper will block vitamin C, vitamin E, magnesium, and zinc. Right there, this will create a problem in the hormonal pathway. As a result, this will have to find another pathway to make the hormones, and it will be a very less efficient pathway, creating a free radical storm, and will pick up a lot of metabolites along the way. Now these metabolites, we know the bus that carries them, and that we can find with the marker called sex hormone binding globulin. That is the bus that carries these metabolites, because this will create a traffic jam, a gridlock. So we'll have some hormones going high, some going low, some will be all over the place when we start to have in this biochemical pathway, when it becomes inhibited due to this very electronegative copper wreaking havoc on the mineral matrix. Now that pregnenolone will also go to that DHEA. We just add some folate, B6, B3, and iron. Remember, copper blocks that, and so then we have that hard time making that DHEA along the way. And so this is creating a cascade of hormones gone crazy, leading to every gynae problem under the sun. And so also we start to create immune problems. Now those immune problems, first it starts with the fatigue and the weight gain and the low energy and all that stuff, but eventually it becomes the autoimmunity, the diabetes, the Hashimoto's. Then it becomes the more insidious diseases. Really the plague of our age is cancer. So now we're going to make that connection to copper, estrogen, and cancer. So I'm going to switch up my whiteboards. Okay, now when we're talking about cancer, we're talking about carcinogens. There's basically 3 main categories of carcinogens. It's the chemicals, the metals, the radiation. You know, the chemicals that we're putting in our hair, putting on our face, putting on our deodorants. It's in everyday parts of our life. You know, that coffee in that styrofoam cup. You know, the carpets, the plastics, all these chemicals bioaccumulate year after year, cycle after cycle, eventually becoming a carcinogen. The metals, the arsenic, the lead, the mercury, the biounavailable copper, the oxidized iron, all these metals become very carcinogenic. And of course, radiation, we know, becomes extremely carcinogenic. So these 3 main categories are the carcinogens that bioaccumulate year after year. So a carcinogen will take a normal cell and create a cancer cell, because we lose the DNA auditing system that keeps a cell healthy. And the DNA auditing system is the amazing magnesium and zinc. Now you need zinc. Now here's the thing with zinc. When we have DNA, DNA has to be copied. And so for DNA to be copied to messenger RNA, there's an enzyme called RNA transferase. that RNA transferase is a zinc-dependent enzyme. So remember, copper blocks that zinc. Now, to make that system work, you need energy, and magnesium is the driving force of making that ATP. Now, ATP is the currency that runs all the biochemistry. It is the money. You know, ATP runs the show. Now, one of the most important nutrients in making ATP is magnesium. So there's basically 3 processes to make an ATP. You know, we take that sugar molecule, that glucose, to ATP, 3 processes: glycolysis, Krebs cycle, electron transport cycle. That's 22 steps in those 3 processes. 12 of those 22 steps require magnesium. It also requires other nutrients, but I'm just, putting the spotlight on the DNA auditing system of how powerful these 2 minerals are in protecting a cell. And so we know that copper blocks those nutrients because of its electronegative properties. And so when we start to have this normal cell become a cancer cell, now the body has another defense mechanism. That cancer cell should just self-explode. We call that apoptosis. That's the button that explodes this cancer cell. But apoptosis is dependent on a few things. It's dependent on a healthy estrogen-progesterone ratio. It's dependent upon proper energy, ATP cycles. It's dependent upon copper and iron balance in the mitochondria, and it's dependent upon copper and its relationship to DHEA, that longevity hormone. So in the first part, in the estrogen-progesterone ratio, when we have too much estrogens, remember those xenoestrogens, those fake estrogens, are creating this estrogen dominant syndrome, and too much estrogen is going to turn on this gene, BCL-2. That's a cancer gene. And so we're turning on the cancer genes, and we're turning off the apoptosis gene. You need progesterone to make this gene, the P53 gene, is the apoptosis gene. This gene influences this copper iron in the mitochondria, and this is what we call the cytochrome C. The cytochrome C leaves the mitochondria to blow up the cancer cell. And so when we start to become more copper dominant and less iron, then this process is thrown off, and then as a result we lose the ability to blow up this cancer cell. Now also, these cancer cells start to accumulate. Eventually the cancer cells become that tumor in the breast, we'll say. And so usually we have the immune patrolling system. That immune patrolling system is keeping this under check. So that would be, we call on the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Coast Guard to help kind of, protect the land and the water and the, in our body. And so the immune patrolling system is zinc, iron, vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin D, and selenium. As a result, when we have that toxic copper, we block the zinc, we block the iron, we oxidize the vitamin C, we oxidize the vitamin E, and as a result, the immune patrolling system becomes weak, and the cancer cells start to proliferate, and now we have a tumor, and that tumor we'll say is the breast. Now, that tumor in the breast may decide to metastasize to the bone. If it decides to metastasize to the bone, that depends on a blood supply. That blood supply is called angiogenesis. And for that blood supply to be laid down, that's a copper-dependent processing. And so when we create that angiogenesis, every cancer cell needs a blood supply, and copper is feeding the angiogenesis. So now we start to see the connection of the estrogen, the copper, and its connection to the plague of our day, which is cancer. So that was a short presentation on the estrogen dominant, the copper dominant syndrome plaguing our world today, and as a result of these cancers that are so prevalent in our country today. So I hope that video was helpful, and thank you for watching.
Ring my friend, I said